So, a subject I think we really need to talk about as a society, as a community, all over the world, honestly, because what's happening in Gaza isn't unique to Gaza. It's not unique to the Israelis, but it is unique to humans. A genocide is a human disaster that is man made, basically, in a nutshell. Now, genocide does have a definite definition. And when you look at what's happening, like in Gaza or like in Sudan or in the Congo, just a couple examples. But the one I have the biggest bone to pick with is the one in Gaza. One, because it is so blatant. Two, because we are paying for it. And I've been able to understand the mass misinformation and disinformation, which those are two different things, campaign against Arabs and Muslims and people of Islamic faith, right? So I don't consider any one religion worse than the other, better than the other. I think they're all equally as good or equally as bad as each other. Because any religion could have a fundamental spin, and here we are in America, where the fundamentalist Christians are trying to take away women's right to choose, women's rights in general. There are people that want to take away women's right to vote, want to make it so you can't work in government. And it's just, it really very much feels like The Handmaid's Tale is coming true. Like Margaret Atwood is a prophet, not an author. I don't really believe in that, but you know what I mean. And I don't believe in religion myself. I am an atheist. I was brought up Protestant. I come from the East Coast. I mean, I was born on the East Coast, but I grew up on the West Coast. My parents were from the East Coast and grew up on the East Coast. And my dad grew up Roman Catholic. That's why he was the oldest of 17 children, and that one of them died. One of them was born as a stillborn, so that they only had 16 living children. I say only. And my mom grew up in a Protestant household where her father worked for the church, and he wasn't a great man, but he wasn't like my dad's dad. So, I mean, just a little background from where I'm coming from. However, I do know a thing or two about abuse. And I'm kind of all over the place, but abuse takes a large part of this story. We don't talk about that part of the story. So the people in Israel that are committing this genocide, there are people that are, helping this happen, right? And you have to have a certain level of cognitive dissonance, right, to support this or participate in it. Now, there are news reports out there that have talked about 10 IDF soldiers have committed suicide while they have been, I think, in the field from what they've done in Gaza. Like, it weighed too heavily on their psyche. And I feel that that's going to start happening more and more as this continues to go on. I don't think many of the IDF soldiers were honestly trained for combat. I think they were trained for terrorism, for having the upper hand, being in a tank, having this machine gun where these people have rocks, maybe a slingshot, I know that that Hamas has missiles, but they're glorified fireworks. They're not missiles. They're not, IBCMs. They're not ballistic missiles. Let's put it that way. And when you have I can't even call this a war, because it's not, because a war implies that there's an army on the other side. And there's not. There's this resistance group called Hamas that wouldn't have even emerged had it not been for the occupation of Israel over Gaza. So, I mean, there's so much in this history, and there's so many resources these days. We are in the age of information and having so much information at our fingertips. And there's so many people that just don't understand what they're even talking about. And they love to tell me, I don't know what I'm talking about. They say, oh, you don't understand history. And it's a way to shut me down. It's to not have a conversation. It's thought stopping and conversation stopping type of conversation. So if someone says to you, and you're trying to, if you are honestly trying to have a conversation about something, and I've tried to have tons of honest conversations online, and I'll tell you, those are the hardest conversations to even have. Because you have this person that's, anonymous basically. Majority of them don't have a picture. I have a picture. I have my full name out there, Melissa Vandridge. My name is I'm not a public figure, but my name is out there publicly. I don't hide it. And I am the only Melissa Vandridge in the entire planet. I'm the only one because my last name is made up. So that's how I know I'm the only Melissa Vandridge. And all the other Vandridges in the world are related to me. They're in my family. And that's it. So it's almost like we have like a little secret club with our last names, but not really. But it's amazing to me that these people are anonymous. You might see the first and last name, but that's it. And they offer no insight. They offer no evidence. They tell me how I'm not presenting evidence, but that they're the ones not presenting any of the evidence. I can talk about 1948. I can talk about when the IDF basically dropped Agent Orange or napalm on one of a U.S. ship, a U.S. Navy ship, and it was clear that it was there, but they still destroyed it, and America let them do it. Didn't really punish them about it. And or when they attacked a ship carrying goods that had some Turkish people on it, and they said there was weapons on there. There was kitchen knives. There was kitchen knives. I mean, there was no weapons on that boat. Forgot what the boat was called. I have a problem with remembering exact names. ADHD. It's a bitch. But and there's, different wars, the War of 1967, and I think there's a conflict of 1982, and in 1987, Hamas sprung out of the woodwork because there was no one to really, the PLO didn't really have their back, and there's a lot of history there. And if you're interested in reading these, Norman Finkelstein, people say he's a disgraced professor. He's not. His book is taught in college level classes because it's accurate, because it's a book of so much history, and he didn't write it in a way to demonize, Israeli people. He's Jewish himself, and he has family that is Jewish, and I can't even comprehend. I can only imagine what it feels like to be a Jewish person watching this happen, being a descendant of the Holocaust, and watching people of your own ethnicity and or maybe your own religion commit such atrocious crimes. And my heart breaks. Like, my heart breaks that this group is committing this. And then when I just think about it in terms of the cycle of abuse, and it kind of makes perfect sense as to what's happening here. Okay, so let's take it down to an individual level, right? So my dad abused me, not sexually, but he physically, mentally, and emotionally abused me. for a good 10 years of my life. The first time I remember, I was 6, and the last time it happened, I was 16. And he died when I was 18. So he did not live much after we left. Now, I did forgive him. The year before he died, he asked me to forgive him. I did. He apologized. He says, I've had a lot of time to think, because I didn't really have any contact with him. He says, I had a lot of time to think and I was wrong. And what I did to you was wrong and you deserve better. And I would like to ask for your forgiveness. And I think at this time he knew he was dying. He was brought up Roman Catholic. So, a lot of people, he was sick for many, many years. I think when people get religious, they, or they know they're kind of dying, they tend to get religious again if they were, brought up in a religious setting. I don't think I will, because I wasn't really into it. I questioned everything about religion, and that's how I got kicked out of Sunday school when I was a little girl. But, it's, it used to baffle me. And then I really learned more about abuse, and it used to baffle me how my dad could hit me or call me these awful names, belittle me. I lived in fear a good amount of my life that I didn't even realize I was living in that kind of fear, because trauma messes you up. It really does. It doesn't mean you can't live a full and happy life. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that I'm not better now. I am better now. I'm so much better now. But the only reason I'm better now is because I got out of those kinds of situations. And I'm with somebody, my husband, who is not perfect in any way, shape, or form, because no one is, but he is perfect for me. And he created the atmosphere where I could be who I am and have my issues, and we worked together. Oh yeah, there was some fighting. Let me tell you, there was some fighting, but we got to a better place eventually, because we had to figure out, he was never abusive, but we had to figure out how he needed to respond to me because of my upbringing, because of my trauma. I have a trauma response, and it kind of changed how we had to interact with each other a little bit, especially if we're fighting and stuff like that. So we created these safety nets while we're fighting. If I say I need to stop, we will stop fighting, and we will come back and talk about it later. We always come back and talk about it. So that's very important to do if you're with your partner. Okay, side tangent. Anyway, but if you think about the cycle of abuse, I was abused by my dad. My dad was abused by his father. I'm sure his father was abused by his father. So on and so forth, right? So I don't know where the abuse started on his side of the family, but it ends with me. I did have a half brother that was my dad's son. He is now deceased as well. And I don't have any natural children. We might adopt, but there will be no abuse in my house. And if we don't adopt, that's okay. But that cycle will end with me, regardless if we adopt or not. And if you think of this system of the cycle of abuse, right? And now if you apply it to a much bigger scale, and let's just think about the Jewish people, right? So Jewish people have systematically and for thousands of years been persecuted, and not even rightfully. No one should be persecuted. There's no reason to persecute people on that scale. And but we all know that humans are assholes. We are assholes. And there's only so much that can happen to people before they snap. And sometimes when you hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I'm seeing this more and more, right? People only see anti-Semitism when there isn't any there, right? So when you think about the Gaza protesters, were there probably a few that were anti-Semitic? Probably, because there's always a few that are. But the bigger effort should never be judged by the few. It should be judged by the majority. And the majority of, I shouldn't call them kids. They're kids to me because I'm almost 50, but I mean, I could be their mother, but I mean, these young adults that are in college and they're making these encampments, and people are like, oh, people like Hillary Rodham Clinton saying, you don't know the history. It's like, no, they do. They probably just learned the history or have been learning the history because it's taught in college. And I mean, I didn't even have to learn that much history to understand what was happening. And you don't even have to listen to history. All you have to do is listen to what the IDF is saying or what the American president is saying, because he'll lie. He's lying every time he opens his mouth about Israel. Every time. On October 7th, did they have a right to defend themselves? Yes. But today, over a year later, do they have the right to defend themselves in this way? No. Your right to defend yourself as a country does not result in genocide. Because if it did, we'd have a much bigger problem in our hands. So, and honestly, the sad reality is genocide is as American as apple pie. That's how this country was founded. Upon genocide. We genocided the Native Americans, the First Nation, the indigenous people. We decimated their numbers. They're about 1% of the total population of the United States. 1%. And that's stunning. It really is. It's stunning how little of those people are still left. And we have to consider that perhaps this is some kind of cycle. And maybe there's some kind of hardwiring inside of our brains, because we don't really understand how much of what we do is our choice. How much of what we do is our choice. I think back to how I react if I get cornered, right? And I don't mean cornered like in a conversation. I mean, if I have a man in particular, because women don't tend to set this off for me. I just get mad. But if I am cornered by a man that is yelling at me, my fight or flight response will in fact kick in. It is a trauma response. And I don't flight. I fight. That's my response. But that's your lizard brain taking over. So, and once you get to that point, there's nothing to stop it. I don't care who says that, oh yeah, you can control everything. Those people who say that have never, ever, ever experienced this. When people say I see red, that's what they mean by that. I saw nothing. There's a point where you have no control over your actions for a brief minute or two, right? I was able to gain control eventually, but you lose that control for a brief moment in time. And so we figured out that I just can't get to that point. Because if I am in that position and that happens to me, this is what I will do. And this is every time. So if we don't get to that point, if I say I need to stop because I feel my anxiety, I feel anger rising in me, and I'm like, we need to stop. Whatever we're talking, that's when the conversation has to stop on a dime. We go our separate ways. Like, you go in his office, I'll go in my office, and cool down. It might take an hour, it may take 5 hours. But we always come back and we talk about it, and then we figure it out. And whatever we're fighting about always gets figured out. And we're always better off because we came back and because we talked about it and because we didn't let it escalate to such a cataclysmic level that someone might get hurt. You get what I'm saying? But I think in some people who get battered, and I'm not saying that literally everyone in Israel was battered so badly that they ended up being this way. There's actually a lot of factors into this. I think there's generational trauma. I know I inherited generational trauma, but there's like different kinds, different levels, if you will, I guess. I don't know what those levels, but I think there's differences in generational trauma. Like the generational trauma that descendants of slaves have, like in the United States, is very different than I think my generational trauma from abuse from my parents. Because I was not abused by society, I was abused by my parents. Get what I'm saying? Or I was abused by my partner later on in life. But society itself didn't shun me. There wasn't buildings I wasn't allowed to go in. There wasn't water fountains I wasn't allowed to drink in. There wasn't toilets I wasn't allowed to use. You get what I'm saying? So all of those weren't a factor for me. But if you look at it in light of being Jewish, like, I don't know what it's like to be Jewish. I can't tell you, but I can only imagine. Okay? So you can somewhat put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Or at least you can try, right? So I try to put myself in their shoes and try to understand. But then also I have to remember that the people who were born in Israel, or weren't maybe born there, but went and did their, forgot what it's called, but it's like a pilgrimage where you go over there between the ages of 18 and like 21 or 24, while you're young and impressionable, before your frontal lobe is fully formed, because you are developing. Your brain develops until about 25 years old. So that's why they want people in that, that section of time, because you're still malleable. You're still impressionable, if you will, right? Most people are malleable during that time. That's why adults that are between the ages of 18 and 24 will sometimes fall into dangerous groups, like a cult, religious cult, whatever kind of cult, And I view the state of Israel as kind of a cult, because it is, right? And hear me out. So if you watch Israelism, and it's online again, I don't know how long it's going to be there, but it's online again, so you should look it up and you should watch that movie. It's very, very interesting. And the woman who produced it and was in it, I don't know if she was in it, but I think she produced it. Her name is Zimmerman is her last name. God, names, help me out with names. What's her first name? Anyway, Miss Zimmerman. I'll pop it up on the screen because my brain is crap when it comes to names. But it wasn't until she got to college is when she realized she's been indoctrinated, right? So she went to Jewish schools, right, if you will, and I think they would be Zionists. They'd be considered Zionist schools where they teach you that Israel is, the only place on earth where the Jews can be safe, blah, 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 and equates Judaism, conflates Judaism with Zionism, and they do that on purpose because they want to tie everybody that's of Jewish faith or origin to them, right? And it's basically, I think that's for buy-in, if you will, right? So if I am tied to a certain thing, I might feel like I need to defend it. You know what I mean? Because that's me. That's part of me. Like white women. I'm a white woman, right? So when there's some young guys, they're like, well, every a white woman that's not near 50 is Karen. I mean, we're not, obviously, but it's a little sad, you know, and I find myself wanting to defend that, but I don't, because it's not worth it, right? But I can kind of see that logic. Now, it doesn't really work on a large scale, because there's tons and tons of American Jewish people who do not support the genocide that's happening right now in Gaza, that has trickled over into Lebanon and is now going to trickle over into Iran. Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. So, and we do have 40,000 troops there already. America does. I know we have destroyer ships and bombers and stuff like that. And like, we're ready to jump in. And that makes me very sad, because guess who's going to bankroll this war? We're going to bankroll not only the destruction, well, we've already bankrolled the destruction of Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza, because they're expanding there. Make no mistake. Israel has made plans to expand to Gaza. They also want to expand into Lebanon. They would also want to take Jordan, parts of Egypt. I mean, and Jordan. See, now the leader of Jordan, I don't know if it's a president or prime minister or whatever, but Jordan has come out and said, look, we will guarantee the safety of Israel if they just let the Palestinians have their own state. Let them to have their own determination. We will guarantee your safety. And I believe them. I believe that they want to secure the safety of the Jewish people, because I don't believe they want the Jewish people to be extinct or be wrecked in any way. I think largely they don't. I think largely they just want, and then when I say they, I mean the greater Middle East, Arabs, Muslims, Islamic, people of Islamic faith, which is Muslims, obviously. People in that area. That's what I mean by they. I think most of them just want a certain amount of safety from Israel, because Israel has absolutely been the aggressor in this, and considering, and now that one leader that was the architect of October 7th is now died. I think it's Yahya Sinwar. Now he's dead, right? So how many? Like, they've killed most of the upper echelons of that group. But you're never ever going to be able to get rid of Hamas, because Hamas is not a one person. It's an idea. It's a resistance group. And the more you batter a community, the more that community will resist that battering. And that's true of anybody in any region. You will never, ever, ever find a conflict where there's a oppressive power, where there was never any violence back. Now, I love that like in if you look at South Africa and their apartheid and the stopping of apartheid, and they were able to do that without any bloodshed, that's amazing. And I wish everything could happen that way. But there's a very big difference between what happened in West Africa and what's happening in Israel or in Gaza right now. People in Palestine have routinely, they in 2018, 2019, I think it was every Friday, they would walk to the wall, the March of Return, and protest, get it going back. They didn't bring any weapons. They weren't killing any Israelis. They weren't hurting anybody. They were literally there to peacefully protest. They did not want aggression. But Israel, the IDF that were there, took shots at people. They would shoot them above their knee. So they had to have above knee amputations because it's a lot harder to function if you're having an above knee amputation rather than a below knee amputation. And they know that. So when you have people who know exactly how to wound you to make your life as difficult as humanly possible without killing you, that's demented. And I'm not saying those specific people are demented. I'm saying the entire society is demented, is sick. And I don't mean that in a derogative way. I mean that in a descriptor way. It's a description of what's going on. It's pure lunacy. It's insanity, what's happening right now. It's insanity how many people are buying into it, how many people are defending it. You can see it happening. When that father was holding up that baby that had no head, I will never get that image out of my brain. I will die with that image right here. It was a scarring image, but it was a necessary image to see. And that image didn't make me hate the Israelis. It didn't make me hate anybody that's Jewish. It made me sad. It made me so sad for the Palestinian people. And they just want us to tell their story. They want us to continue to talk about them. And so here we all are, trying to talk about them. I try my best to talk in online groups. You know, I do my best to not have inflammatory rhetoric or speech. You know, I don't want to call anyone a bigot. I don't want to call anyone, it's easy to go, oh, you're just racist. You're just a bigot. That's easy to do. And what I find is maddening is when you are so careful to not be inflammatory. Like, to this woman named Sophia, she was talking and she kept coming back at me with these accusations, and she wasn't interested in having any kind of conversation. It was very one-sided, this conversation. I would say something and, I'd say something along the lines of, there's no justification for a genocide. There just isn't. It doesn't matter what they did. Now, I'm not saying that what they did does not matter. Put that into perspective. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is nothing the Palestinian people could have done to deserve this treatment, to deserve the large-scale bombing of Gaza, the destruction of everything, the sniping of children, the sniping of journalists, hospital workers. If you think of Al Shifa Hospital, and they bombed that hospital or burnt it to shit. And the people in those mass graves, I don't remember if it was one mass grave or multiple mass graves, but there were hospital workers that were hands behind their back, zip tied and buried. And they think some of them are buried alive. That's horrific. That's horrific. Patients hooked up to IVs, still wearing hospital gowns. It really is unconscionable. And we're going to look back at this in the exact same way we look back at the Holocaust. And honestly, it takes me, there's no pleasure in this. I mean, there's no pleasure in genocide ever. But you know what I mean? I think this one, more than any of them, hurts my heart most. Because here is a people that were persecuted for thousands of years and are now the perpetrators. They have become the monster they despise. They have become the Nazi. And now we have, UK is making laws against criticizing Israel. America wants to. There's a few colleges that have, in fact, made it not okay, against their policy, to criticize Israel. No matter how you criticize them. You just can't criticize them. And there's those people out there, they're like, oh, I wonder what Israel has on America. No, that relationship is actually an opposite relationship. Because America is controlling Israel. Because honestly, we would cut off the funding if we didn't want them to do something. They are our vassal welfare state. And they are. They are an American welfare state. We give them money, we give them defense, and we give them weapons. A lot of weapons. I mean, they keep saying they're the most moral army in the world. And God, I wish that were true. I really do wish that were true. Because we wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be having talking about this. People wouldn't be dying in droves. I mean, people are starving, actively starving to death. There are children in the Gaza Strip right now that look like they are in a concentration camp from 1930 Germany or early 1940 Germany. And it's sad. It's sad that they can't see the parallels. Now, there are a lot of people that are of Jewish descent that do see the parallels and that are avidly against it. They have been protesting everywhere they can. They are protesting synagogues even that are selling the illegal seizure of land. The West Bank, they've been auctioning off people's land they've been stealing in the West Bank. And I know Netanyahu wants Trump to win because Trump will let Netanyahu do whatever he wants. Whatever he wants. And doesn't care about what kind of regional war will be spiked because of it. Hezbollah has only been sending rockets because of what happened on October 7th and not because of what Hamas did. It was because of the response from Israel. It was within 2 hours that they started bombing Gaza. Within hours. But it took hours for them to really kind of show up to help people in the not the Knesset, but the I can't remember all these terms, but you know what I'm saying. Because there was that festival that shouldn't have happened, and this isn't conspiratorial. It's actually been proven. because they were given intel. They knew this was going to happen. And they either ignored it, which I don't think that's the one that they did, or they willfully ignored it, which I think that's the closer to the truth. Because I think the people in power saw this as an excellent opportunity to get to where they want to be. Because if you can allow a mass atrocity and also taking into consideration how many people Israel killed of their own people. They shelled houses filled with people from Israel. Like, not filled with Hamas, filled with people from Israel. And people from Israel that survived that are speaking out. They're like, no, we were bombed by our own government. And that has to be a certain level of fuckery to you, right? When you're bombed by your own government. Come on. Like, Syrian people know all about that. And it's like, I don't know how we get to the other side of this. The only thing I can think of is to continue to talk the truth. Continue to spread the truth of what's really going on. Not lie about it. And not to call Israeli people evil either, because evil doesn't actually exist. It's not a real thing. It's something that we made up. It's a construct, like anything else. Like money. Money's a construct. It's not a real thing. It doesn't have intrinsic value. But human beings, we do have intrinsic value. We have intrinsic value. All of us. Regardless of your color, regardless of your faith, regardless of where you were born, regardless of your nationality, regardless of who you were born to. I feel bad for the people who, the children who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time for the leaders of Hamas. Or maybe they weren't like, but the IDF doesn't care. We know they can do precision strikes because they have in other countries. The leader they took out in Tehran, that was a precision strike. And they could have done something like that, but they didn't want to do that. They're like, oh, we're doing our best to not have mass casualties, to protect the civilians. No, they're not. They're just lying. But the people of Israel believe it because they're fed nothing but propaganda. Which we're fed a lot of propaganda. And if you only watch mainstream media and you're not on TikTok and you're not on X Twitter, then you may not understand the truth. I do suspect, though, a lot of people that are out there that are defending Israel, that aren't actually Israeli, that are just other American citizens, really aren't. They really don't care. They just are using it as a way to hate Muslims, which is wrong. When the World's Trade Center was bombed, well, not bombed, but when the trade centers came down in 2001, I was 25 years old. Well, I was about to be 25 years old. I was 24 technically when that happened. I would be 25 a month and 1 day later. No, 26. I was 25. I can't do math. Okay, so I was 25. I was almost 26. And during that time in my life, I did not have a lot of world history. Reading is hard for me. I have ADHD. It makes me fall asleep. I do as much as I can, but it's not my strong suit. Like, I was in special ed reading growing up because I was so bad at it. I was bad at reading out loud. I have gotten better. In fact, me and my husband were talking about the other night how much better I am at it. Because the first time he heard me read out loud, he was like, wow. Like, he didn't say this, but he was thinking this at the time. He didn't tell me this until like last night. But he remembers thinking that he could read better out loud when he was 8 years old than I could as a grown adult. Well, it's because I have a disability. ADHD is very much a disability, and it affects a lot of your brain and affects different things. And mine affects, but reading out loud makes me fall asleep less. It makes me more tired. Like it's tiring to me. Anyway, so I didn't read a lot. All that to say, I didn't read a lot back then. And I didn't really pay that much attention to much news. I didn't get many things around the world. I mean, I was just trying to survive at that point in my life, I was just working and trying to get somewhere. I don't know where I was trying to get, but in and out of college at that point. And yeah, so, I was one of the people that just wasn't that engaged with world history or politics. And so, and even then, the people just hating Muslim people after 9/11, even though it was, caused by some extremists. And they were extremists. That's true. But it wasn't done in a vacuum. But even though I didn't know that back then, I also knew that just randomly hating Muslim and Arab people for zero reason that are in America is not the right thing to do. There are people defacing mosques. I remember taking some flowers to a mosque. But you can't judge an entire group of people by something some of that group did, Like, I would never want to be judged by some Proud Boys. I'm not a white supremacist, but I am white. And so I could be lumped into those kinds of people, just by somebody else. And I don't want that to happen, because that would be horrible, as I do not agree with that. And just because someone is of Arabic descent or is Muslim or Muslim descent, or have been Muslim previously or now atheist, there's a reason why they came to America. It's because they wanted a different life than whatever their country had to offer them. Maybe they wanted better rights for their women. I don't know. I don't know why they came here, but I know that they come here for a different way of life. And maybe they want to keep their customs and traditions, and I'm glad that they do, to a point, because you shouldn't totally forget who you were and where you came from. I knew if I lived in another country, if it wasn't white and English speaking, I would be very foreign to that country. But I wouldn't want to change everything about me to assimilate into the new culture. I'd rather assimilate into the new culture, but still have my own belief systems and, cultures and stuff like that. But then later on, I learned about, why. And it's all the awful things that the United States has done in the Middle East for years and years and years. Saudi Arabia was the ones that were really, like, the most of the people were from Saudi Arabia. But we didn't attack them because they're our friends. And we love their oil. And we have the petrodollar, which is no longer in effect. I think, usually empires run about 250 years. So we're at the end of our run, probably. And so the American empire is about to fall. It may not fall this year, but it'll fall within the next 10. And it just depends on how it falls, on what we do, is gonna be how horrific it is for us, you know. And I think we can mitigate that, the fall of, you know, Western Empire, because that's really what the fall will be. It won't be just America, it'll be Western Empire. And while America might be the strong, you know, we became the new empire, America did, you know, our American exceptionalism. We're not exceptional. You know, we're not better than anybody else in the world. We don't live in the best country in the world, because there isn't a best country in the world. They don't exist. There are better countries than some, but there's no best country. I mean, I guess technically there could be, but it's not America. I'll tell you that. When we have we have so many people on the streets that are homeless because life has made it impossible for a lot of people to afford a home. Buying a house these days is impossible. So people in Millennium and Gen Z, good luck buying a house. I'm lucky I bought a house when we did. My husband's a millennial. He's an elder millennial, and I am a young Gen Xer. So we're not that far apart, you know, in how we see things and how we see the world. But let's go back to my first event, how I started this video with the cycle of abuse. So I encourage everyone to start looking at what's happening in the world as a cycle of abuse. So not to place blame on just one individual, but to understand how going forward, not even going forward, but how it affects. Like if you look at everything that's happened to, like, Jewish people, for example, right? Over and a whole. And yes, is anti-Semitism a problem? Yes, it still is. But is everything that's labeled anti-Semitism right now actually anti-Semitism? No. Because when you say you can't criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic, that's stupid. I can criticize a country, the government of that country. That doesn't say that the people that live there shouldn't exist. But people will equate that. And it's ridiculous. And I'm not sure how to get past that. So if you have any good ideas, and if you've been here for this long in this video, know that my heart loves you. And please hit the like button. Help me out here. Subscribe. I would love to have you, and let me know what you think of this video. It might be a little all over the place. Like I said, I have ADHD, and hopefully I might have some better medication like coming soon. So maybe I'll be less all over the place, but you know, this is who I am, and this is how I come to the world. So people either accept it or they don't. I am used to that now, and I'm okay with it. So thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.